Good morning. This is Muhammad Sulaiman, Assistant Professor of Commerce, working at MVS Government Degree College, Autonomous, Mahbub Nagar. Today, let us learn about Contract Act. As all of us do a lot of transactions every day, and we know that business is an activity started to earn a profit. So, in that activity, we take various decisions in the area of business regulatory framework and we come across various transactions. We do various transactions every day with different business houses like placing an order, paying online, and purchasing by visiting the shops physically, buying the products online, everything. So, in this situation, we come across various contracts that we enter into various business houses knowingly or unknowingly. So, in this situation, it is important for us to know what type of rules and regulations that we are bound to and what type of different laws that we are supposed to follow. So, in this situation, it is important for us to know about Contract Act. And the objectives of the lesson are first, we'll be looking into the introduction part of the Contract Act, how the Contract Act has developed, and what are the different basics of Contract Act. Then we will see what is the law of contract and definition of contract, elements of contract, and essential elements of a valid contract. As all of us know that law is nothing but the different rules and principles established by some authority, and law operates to regulate the behavior of individuals and groups and business firms. Imagine a society or a situation where there are no laws. Then, in such a situation, it will be difficult to regulate the behavior of different individuals and to regulate the different business houses in order to ensure justice, peace, and social order in the society. Hence, law is established by some authority which aims at regulating the behavior of different individuals or groups in the society. So, every day, day in and day out, knowingly or unknowingly, we are bound by some law. Law, being a wider subject, touches every walk of our life, and there are different branches of law like civil, criminal, administrative, constitutional, business, labor laws, and so on. So, the legal framework in which the business firms operates are governed by general laws. Now, in this situation, we should know about what is business law. Business law deals with the rights and obligations arising out of mercantile transactions. Here we talk about mercantile transactions. Mercantile transactions take place between mercantile persons who involve in exchange of goods and services or buying and selling of goods and services. Hence, business law denotes the aggregate body of rules connected with trade, industry, and commerce. Here we need to know about what is trade, what is industry, and what is commerce. Trade is nothing but the activity of give and take. When one person wants to buy something, he should identify a seller. When one seller wants to sell something, he should identify a buyer. When the buyer and seller interact with each other and the transaction takes place or the transaction is about to take place, then it is called trade. Then in trade, they give offer and they give different advertisements for which they are ready to sell or exchange their product or goods, and the Prospective buyers who are ready to buy the product will place an order either personally or over the phone or by visiting their website and so on. So, in this way, the buyer and seller interact with each other and the transaction of buy and sell will take place. So, this is regarding trade. It is understood that the exchange of money will happen and the consideration for the good is paid in the form of money. Then we need to know about what is industry. Industry is a group of firms producing and selling the similar product to the same set of customers. Take for example the example of cement industry. In cement industry we have different cement companies producing cement. So if we observe the cement produced by different companies or different firms, almost the product will be heterogeneous. So the nature of product will be having the uh, same qualities. Of course, a minor difference may exist between the cement given by different companies, but heterogeneous attribute is present in the product. Take for example the textile industry. Textile industry consists of many textile companies producing the same textile, but there may be some differences. But it is important to note that they are producing the same product and selling to the same set of customers. So, industry is nothing but a group of firms producing the similar product and satisfying the need of same set of customers. Then we need to know about commerce. Commerce is nothing but the sum total of activities relating to trade and aids to trade. So, commerce meaning itself says that it is the sum total of activities relating to trade and aids to trade. Trade already we have discussed. It is the activity of give and take and the activity of exchange between two parties. And aids to trade is nothing but the different the different activities which help the trade happen smoothly without any difficulty like insurance, banking, infrastructure, financial services, electricity, etc. All these things are called aids to trade. All the aids to trade put together will help the trade happen smoothly. Hence, aids to trade will help the uh, functioning of trade in a smooth manner and without any difficulty. So, in this process between the trade, industry, and commerce, we come across different type of situations, or we come across different types of contracts in which we are supposed to know different laws which we are bound to, and such laws are called business laws. Now, let us see what is the law of contract. The law of contract is the foundation to various business laws. Various business laws are covered under the law of contract. The law of contract basically poses three questions. First one, is there an agreement? And second one, can the parties to agreement enforce it in the court of law? And third question, if they can enforce it, how they can enforce it? What is the modus operandi of enforcing the agreement? If these three conditions are satisfied, then we can say that the agreement is okay. Now, moving further, let us see what is the history of Indian Contract Act, how the Contract Act has emerged in. The history of Indian Contract Act is a very big one, and all the laws relating to the contracts in India are contained in the Indian Contract Act 1872. This act came into force on 1st September 1872 and it is applicable to entire India. This act, when it was enacted, originally had 266 sections, which can be divided into two parts. And these two parts have been modified from time to time, and the Contract Act that we are discussing now is basically dependent fully on the Indian Contract Act 1872. So we cannot assume or we cannot think of Contract Act without the Indian Contract Act 1872. Having known the history of Indian Contract Act, now let us see the definition of contract. There are many definitions given for contract, but let us try to understand what a contract is actually. A contract is nothing but an agreement to do something or not to do something. When two persons interact with each other to do an activity, then it is called an agreement. Or when two persons interact with each other to not to do an act, then also it is an agreement. But it is important to remember that if the agreement is legally binding and is enforceable at law, then only it will become contract. Otherwise, it will not become a contract. It will remain as an agreement only. So here we need to understand that a contract is an agreement to do an act or not to do an act. It is a legally binding agreement. So I repeat, it is a legally binding agreement. It is agreement plus legal. So it is a legally binding agreement which is enforceable at law. If somebody challenges in the court of law, the court should support the agreement because the agreement is within the purview or sphere of law and can be enforceable and is not against anybody in the society or against the public policy. So now let us see one famous definition given by Sir Frederick Pollock. He says that every agreement and promise enforceable at law is a contract. So I repeat, he says that every agreement and promise enforceable at law is a contract. So as discussed earlier, he made it very clear that it is an agreement and it is enforceable at law. So it has two essential elements. First of all, it is an agreement. And second one, it has enforceability attribute in the court of law. Hence, every agreement and promise enforceable at law is a contract. So based on this, we can say that there are two essential elements of a contract. The first essential element is agreement and second essential element is enforceability at law. If there is no enforceability, then the contract will never become a contract but will remain as an agreement. But if it is enforceable, then the agreement will become a contract and it can be enforced and it is acceptable by law also. So having known the definition, now let us go into bit detail of elements of contract. The elements of contract are two. One is agreement and one is enforceable at law. So now let us see what is an agreement. An agreement is nothing but every promise or set of promises forming consideration for each other. Forming consideration for each other. Now we have to know what is consideration. Consideration is nothing but something in return. If I do an act or if I do some work, what is that I am getting in return? What is that I am getting in return of the activity that I have done? Without consideration, there is no contract. It is important to remember. Without consideration, there is no contract. Or in one stanza, no consideration, no contract. Hence, every promise should lead to some sort of consideration. Or every set of promises should give something as consideration. Consideration is nothing but something in return or reward to do an activity. When the agreement carries some consideration, then it holds value. Now, let us see what is an agreement. Agreement is made up of two things. Agreement is equal to offer plus acceptance. So, in other words, it can be said that a proposal, when accepted, becomes a promise or agreement. First of all, there shall be a proposal. So, what do you mean by proposal here? When one person intends to do some activity, when one person intends to take up some activity, then he should ventilate that thinking, or he should ventilate, or he should express that activity, or he should express that work to be done to some other person. For example, if I want to sell my house, so I should give an offer to somebody. Otherwise, the outside world do not know that I want to sell my house. So for that purpose, I should give a proposal or offer to somebody, either in the specific form or in the general form. But I should express my idea. I should express my thought. I should express my thinking that I want to sell my house. So if I give this uh, proposal to someone, then it is called offer. Now, the person who listens, the person who comes to know about the selling of my house will respond to it if he has an intention to buy my house. Then, if someone responds, if someone says okay for it, if someone says yes for it, then it is called acceptance. Now, it is important to remember that for giving acceptance, there should be some offer. Acceptance cannot be given without offer. If there is offer, then only acceptance can be given. If there is no offer, then acceptance cannot be given. Now, while giving offer itself, it is important to note that the mode in which an offer was given, how the offer was given. If the offer is given only for teachers, then it is a specific offer. If the offer is given only for uh, professors, then the offer is specific offer. So it is my wish, or it is my will that I want to sell my house to only teachers. Then the person or the buyer who wants to buy that house, or who want to buy my house, should be a teacher. So what I expect is I want to sell my house to some teacher. So what I expect is I have given offer to teachers, and some teacher should accept my offer. Then such type of offer is called a specific offer. So if other than teachers respond to my offer, I will say no, because I have given offer only for teachers. Of course, sometimes I mention in the offer itself that this is an offer only for teachers. Teachers shall buy my house. Or interested teachers can call me at so and so number. So let us assume, apart from teachers, one engineer called me one day saying that, sir, I want to purchase your house. Then I may say directly that, sir, I have given an offer to sell my house only to teachers. I am sorry, I cannot sell to you because you are not a teacher. So such type of offers are called specific offers. And when offer is given to general public at large without putting a stipulation or condition, or without putting any condition, then it is called a general offer. So anyone who can pay the price, let us assume I want to sell my house for 10 lakhs. Any person who can pay rupees 10 lakhs can buy my house. Then this type of offer is called general offer, and it does not have any conditions. A teacher can buy it, an engineer can buy it, or any other person, an employee can buy it, an unemployee can buy it, a business person can buy it, or any other person can also buy it. So in such a case, that offer is called general offer. So offer can be a specific offer, and offer can be a general offer. So when there is an offer, then there can be some acceptance. When acceptance is given against some offer provided, then it will become agreement. Then the agreement shall be within the purview of law. It should not be against the public policy. If it is against the public policy, it can never become a contract. It will remain only as an agreement, but it will never become a contract. When the agreement is enforceable at law, then it will become a contract. So, what do you mean by enforceable at law? If somebody files a suit against it, if somebody files a case against the agreement made by two parties, then the court should not object. The court should not say that it is against public policy. If it is against public policy, then the agreement will never be a contract. Hence, all contracts are agreements, but all agreements are not contracts. This is why, because sometimes the agreements may lack the quality of enforceability at law. In such a case, the agreement can never become a contract. It is important to note that all contracts are agreements, but all agreements are not contracts. This is because of only one condition, that is enforceable at law. Now let us see how a contract can become enforceable. An agreement to become a contract must give rise to legal obligations on the parties. The common acceptance formed and communicated between two parties must create legal relations, and not merely the relations which are purely social, family wise, domestic, or any other relations that are not recognized by law. So, if the agreement does not give rise to any legal obligations, then it can never become a contract. If it in the eyes of law there is no such legal obligation between two parties, then the agreement will remain as agreement only. It will not become a contract. The other kind of obligations which do not give rise to some sort of contractual obligations are just agreements. For example, the younger brother may ask elder brother to pay his college fees. Out of love and affection, or out of his family relation, elder brother may say, yes, I will pay your college fees. Let us assume the fee is 2000 rupees. So, this is an agreement which is purely domestic, and it is not intended to create any legal relation between two brothers. If there is no legal obligation between two brothers, then that is just an agreement but not a contract. There is famous case in this point, that is called Balfour versus Balfour, that happened in the year 1919. Mr. Balfour was employed in Ceylon, and Mrs. Balfour, his wife, due to her ill health, had to stay in England and could not accompany him to Ceylon. Mr. Balfour only went to Ceylon on employment basis, and his wife had to stay only in England. And after that, Mr. Balfour promised to send her 30 pounds per month while he was abroad for the expenses, domestic expenses. After some time, Mr. Balfour, that is husband, failed to pay that amount. We don't know what was the reason, but he failed to pay that amount, that is 30 pounds per month. Later on, Mrs. Balfour, his wife, filed a suit against her husband, that is Mr. Balfour, for recovering the said amount. The court held that it was a mere domestic agreement between wife and husband, that is a family agreement. And the promise made by the husband in this case was not intended to create any legal obligation. Hence, the case was not accepted. Now, we learn here that it was just an agreement and it could not become a contract. Hence, to become a contract, therefore, the agreement shall have enforceability at law, otherwise it will not become a contract. Now, moving further, let us see what are the different essential elements of a valid contract. So, we have learned that all agreements are not contracts, but all contracts are agreements. So, when a contract is valid contract, it means that it fulfills all types of legal formalities and obligations and requirements that a valid contract should have. And an agreement which cannot be enforced at law will lack either one or many of these essential elements. Now let us see one by one all the essential elements of a valid contract. So if we see roundabout, there are 10 essential elements of a valid contract. Now let us see one by one what are those essential elements of a valid contract. The first and foremost essential element of a valid contract is there should be an offer and acceptance. So without offer and without acceptance, there shall not be an agreement or there shall not be any contract. In order to create a valid contract, there must be a lawful offer by one party and lawful acceptance of the same by the other party. Someone should say, I will do this or I want to do this, then someone should say that, yes, I accept this or yes, I am ready for it. So, for that purpose, then the offer and acceptance, that is lawful offer and lawful acceptance is essential. Then, second one, there must be an intention to create legal relationship. So, as discussed in the case Balfour versus Balfour, there must be an intention to create legal relationship. The offer and acceptance, which is being exchanged by two parties or more than two parties, should carry some legal obligation upon acceptance. If there is no legal obligation upon acceptance, then the intention to create legal relationship is not there. It is just a domestic or family agreement which does not provide any legal obligation on one party or either party. So, in such a case, if there is no legal relationship, then it cannot become a contract. Then, third one, lawful consideration. What do you mean by lawful consideration? The consideration paid as a compensation by one party to the other party should be judicious. It shall be legitimate and it shall have equal value or approximate value or agreed value of the product or good or service in exchange. For example, if you want to buy a pen of 10 rupees, the consideration shall be something around 10 rupees or 10 rupees. You cannot buy a pen of 10 rupees for just 50 paisa, or you cannot buy a pen of 10 rupees for rupees 1 or for rupees 2. So, in such a case, the consideration is not lawful. That is why consideration is called as the price for which the promise of another is bought. Assume, take for example, that we are purchasing a house worth of 1 crore rupees. So, what is normally expected when one person purchases that house, he should pay something around 1 crore or 1 crore at least, or more than 1 crore. But in this case, if you see that he is purchasing that house only for 1 lakh, or if he is purchasing that house only for 5 lakhs, so we can understand that the consideration is not judicious, our consideration is not legitimate, our consideration is not the appropriate one. Then, if there is a legal dispute later on and somebody goes to or approaches to the court saying that the consideration paid in this case was not legitimate, then the law enforces only those promises which are made for appropriate or judicious consideration. If the consideration is not appropriate, then the contract becomes weak. Hence, consideration shall be judicious, legitimate, or equal. But it is important to note that consideration may be in the form of money, goods, or services. It is not necessary that consideration shall be always in the form of money. It can be in the form of goods also. It can be in the form of services also. Or it can be in the form of exchange of some other thing also. But consideration may be past, consideration may be present, or consideration may be for future time also. But the condition is it must be real and lawful. It must be real and lawful. If the consideration is not real and if the consideration is not lawful, then that contract will become weak. Having known about the consideration, now let us move on to one more essential element called capacity of parties. Here it is important to note that the parties who are there in the agreement must be competent to enter into the contract. If the parties are not competent to enter into the contract, then that contract is not a valid contract. Let us assume a person who is not eligible to enter into a contract has signed a contract. Can we assume that contract will be declared as a valid contract? No. If one of the parties or both of the parties do not have the capacity to enter into a contract, then the contract is not valid. Now we are put a question: who is eligible to enter into a contract and who is not eligible to enter into a contract? Or what type of persons or who are incompetent to enter into a contract? Here it is important to note that there are few persons who are incompetent to enter into a contract. First type of persons, those who are incompetent to enter into contracts are minors. When we talk about a minor is a person who has not attained the age of majority, that is 18 years. A person who is below 18 years of age is not eligible to enter into a contract. And even if a contract is entered into a person with a person who is a minor, then that contract is not valid. So a contract entered with a minor is not valid. Hence, capacity of parties becomes more important when we talk about formation of a contract. Then second type of persons who are not eligible to enter into a contract are the persons of unsound mind. The persons of unsound mind. What do we know about unsound mind? A person having unsound mind will have some sort of disturbance in his thinking, in his rational thinking, and a person of unsound mind cannot take his decisions on his own. For example, a person who is a lunatic, or a person who is a mad, or a person who is suffering from insanity of mind, or a person who is suffering from mental decay, they cannot think on their own and decide about good and bad. In such a case, the thinking ability or the competency of the person is not sufficient to think about the contract which he is entering into or signing on it. In such a case, the persons who are having some unsoundness or who are having unsound mind are not eligible to enter into a contract. Then third type of persons who cannot enter into a contract are those persons disqualified by law. For example, a person who is declared as insolvent. Insolvency is a condition where a person is unable to pay his dues and approaches the court of law for declaring him as insolvent because he is unable to pay his debts. In such a case, the persons who are declared as disqualified from entering into any contract cannot enter into a contract because of their position under law. So, according to law, they are insolvents and they cannot enter into any type of contract. So, apart from this, there may be some other persons who are not eligible to enter into a contract. But here we have a discussion about three persons only. Now, let us see the next essential element of a valid contract, that is free consent. When we talk about free consent or consent, consent means the acceptance or yes condition of a person to one particular offer. For example, when I give an offer to sell my house, the person on the other end or the person on the other side should accept my condition without any fear or without any influence or without anything in his mind. He should be free from all types of pressures or tensions while giving the answer or acceptance to me. Then we talk about free consent. What do you mean by free consent? Free consent is said to be a free consent, or a consent is said to be free when it is not caused by number one, coercion, second one, undue influence, and third one, fraud, fourth one, misrepresentation, and fifth one, mistake. In these five conditions, are under the influence of these five conditions, if one person gives consent, then it is not a free consent. Why it is not a free consent means it is a consent which is influenced by some other external pressure, or it is a consent which is influenced by some other factor. For example, when we take the consent of a person with coercion, then the person will give consent under fear, or the person will give consent without his wholeheartedness. In such a case, tomorrow there is a possibility that he may claim that I have not given free consent. Then, in another situation, if a person gives consent under undue influence of some other person or some position or any some other condition under which he is having some pressure. In such a case, the undue influence has impact on the consent of the other party. Then also the consent is not free. Then in another case like fraud, misrepresentation or mistake, the consent given by the party is not free. If there is no free consent, then there is no contract. Now let us move on to some other essential elements of valid contract. Next essential element of a valid contract is the object shall be lawful. It means the purpose or design or the intention of the contract shall be legal. It shall not be illegal. For example, when one person hires a house, he should tell his intention about what is he doing with that house. If the person has taken the house for gambling, which is prohibited, let us assume, then the object of taking the house on rent is not legal. Hence, the contract will become invalid. The object of the contract in this condition is to run a gambling house, which is not correct. Then, how to decide that the object is lawful or unlawful? To say some object as unlawful, it is important to note that the object shall not be forbidden by law, it shall not be prohibited, or the object shall not be fraudulent in order to do some fraud, or it should not involve to hurt anyone or to create an injury to some person or property or any other thing, or it should not be in a condition which would defeat the provisions of any law. In simple terms, it should not go against the law. When it is not going against the law, then the object of a contract is lawful. When the object of a contract is not lawful, then the contract is invalid or it becomes invalid. It will not stand in the court regarding the completion of the contract. The next one is certainty of meaning. Certainty of meaning says that the terms of the contract must be precise and certain and clear, but cannot be confusing or vague or ambiguous. If the terms and conditions of the contract are ambiguous, or if the terms and conditions of the contract are confusing and not clear, then it is difficult to complete, or if it is difficult to understand, or it is difficult to decide whether the contract is a valid one or not valid one. So in such a case, the contents or the terms and conditions that are written or that are agreed upon in the contract shall be precise, certain and clear, and shall not be confusing. So in such a case, when there is certainty of meaning in the contract, or when there is certainty of meaning in the agreement made, then it is enforceable. Otherwise, it is difficult to enforce that agreement. The next one is possibility of performance. This is very important in case of writing the contract. The activities which are not possible to perform, the activities which are not supposed to be done, or the activities which cannot be done shall not be a part of the agreement. For example, a person may enter into a contract with some other person saying that tomorrow the sun rises on the west. Is it possible? Is it in our hands? No, it is not in our hands. Or take for example, a person may enter into an agreement to pour life into a person who has died. Is it possible for us to pour life into a person who is already died? No. The possibility of performance of these agreements is difficult. It is impossible. So in such a case, all such agreements which are impossible cannot be enforced in the court of law. In such a case, the contracts become invalid because of the possibility of performance, and such agreements are not enforceable. It will remain as agreement only, but it will never become a contract. The next condition or next essential element of a valid contract is not declared to be void or not declared to be illegal. Sometimes the agreements which are made by different parties or between different parties should be a valid agreement and should not have been declared as void by any law that is in force in the country. There may be some announcements, or there may be some legislations made by the governments from time to time which prohibit or which ban certain activities, or which ban trade with certain persons, or trade with certain countries, or trade with certain uh, parties. In such a case, knowingly or unknowingly, if someone enters into that contract, if someone enters into that agreement, then those agreements cannot be enforced in the eyes of law because they are already declared as void. Then in such a case, the contract becomes invalid. It will remain as agreement only, but it will never become a contract. So in such a case, it is important to check that the agreement which we are entering into it is not declared to be void by any law that is in force in the country. Then the last important essential element of a valid contract is legal formalities. According to the Contract Act, the legal formalities required have to be fulfilled and followed. If you take the example in our country, writing is required in case of some contracts like sale, mortgage, lease, gift, and any other uh, activities which involve huge amount. If these type of agreements are not written, then it will become weak, and in some cases registration is required. If registration is not fulfilled in such cases, then it is difficult to decide whether the contract is a valid one or not. Hence, it is to see that all the legal formalities, including payment of some fees, if fees is applicable, then fees has to be paid. So, by fulfilling all these 10 conditions, we can ensure that we have fulfilled the essential elements of valid contract, and the contract can be enforced in the eyes of law. Thank you.